program for early stage startup on precision medicine. My name is Michael. I'm a leader of the program. Tonight is our third event. First of all, let's welcome Dan, our director of marketing and BD, to give a brief introduction about the program. Dan?
Okay, yeah, yes, thank you, Michael. So good evening, everyone. My name is Dan Zhang. I'm the Director of Marketing and BD at Cubase Center. Welcome, join us in the webinar today. So good evening, Howard. Thank you for being the speaker. I'm glad we can have you join us.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited about the incubator, and as I'm learning what the incubator is working to achieve, a lot of the things that I do will certainly involve incubators, and I'll talk about some of that in a little bit. But again, thanks for having me, and look forward to providing this presentation tonight.
Sure.
Just as a brief background to myself, so the audience understands a little bit more about me.
Go ahead. Let me do a brief introduction about you. And tonight we're going to have two speakers. So, but before that, Dan, just go ahead and make a very brief introduction about the program, and I'll cue the speakers later.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Howard. So Michael, could you give me the power to share my screen?
I thought I already did, right? I shared with you, right?
I think you need to make me co-host.
Okay, I already did.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Okay, so Cubase Center was founded in September 2018. We are a global platform to connect and support innovation and entrepreneurship. I'm based in Silicon Valley campus. This site is sitting at the heart of San Jose City, with Intel, Cisco, and Samsung as our neighbors. Besides the Silicon Valley campus, Cubase also set up several innovation centers in other countries already, including Israel, Australia, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, and Mexico. We focus on high-tech, life science, and AI industries. This August, so we launched the first Startup Accelerator program. This program aims to help promising startups scale efficiently and effectively in the global market. During the 4-month program, the selected startups will get all the resources needed for their development through Cubase platform, including free office space, mentor training, VC connections, pitch opportunities, and service credit from our partners. In addition, we invite our mentors and advisors every 2 weeks to host webinars with our startups. So if everyone is interested in attending the future events, please feel free to follow our social media platform. If you have any questions or suggestions, welcome to connect with our team. We have Michael, he is our lead of program operations, Ryan, who is our BD manager, Lucy and Sam from our intern team. So I hope everyone can enjoy the event tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan, for the introduction of Cubase. Again, we're a very new organization and welcome to support us more. Okay, let's get it started. Tonight, hang on a minute. Yeah, tonight we have two speakers, including our program mentor, Howard Edelman, and also we have a startup company pitching, Rise Precision Medicine. Considering well, last time actually some people said the Q&A session was quite short, so this time we'll only have one pitching company from now to save more time on the questions. First of all, let me give an introduction about our mentor, Howard Edelman, who is CEO of Advanced Racing Therapeutics, also the CEO of Max, also the chairman of Life Science Angels, CEO of Tessa Medical, and a VP of Business Development of Sequoia Life Sciences, Chief Revenue Officer at Product Realization Groups. So basically, a lot of roles. It's maybe half fun, half painful. I don't know. Howard got tons of experience from different directions of the healthcare industry, and from startup to big companies. Can you just mute yourself? Sorry. From startup to big companies, also to investment, right? So tonight, Howard is going to talk about how to tonight, Howard is going to talk about how to grow from a seed to form a big company in terms of the medical devices point of views. Howard, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, tonight we have some audience through the live streaming platform like Facebook and YouTube. So people are also watching there too. Howard, you should have the full control now.
Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen. And if you can see that, okay?
Yeah.
All right. I'll repeat just a little bit more of my background so the audience understands that a little bit more. And I will focus tonight on discussing growing a medical device company and some of the key elements. But I'm going to do this a little bit also from not just the entrepreneur's perspective, but from the investor perspective. And as you mentioned, there are a few different roles that I have right now. One is I'm part of a group called Life Science Angels. And you can tell from the name that we're early stage investors. And I currently chair the medical device and the digital health screening committee for Life Science Angels. Life Science Angels is independently assessed as, if not the premier angel investing group in the country, certainly one of the top three. Our focus is all in healthcare. That's all we do. We have about 150 members. We're based in Palo Alto. We invest only in US companies, but again, in healthcare. So I chair the medical device and digital health screening committee. And we have a second committee called our bio committee, which a lot of your audience may also have interest in. But the focus there is on pharma and drug development, genomics, molecular biology, and so forth. I also have an entrepreneur in residence role here locally at UCSF in the Venture Innovations Group. Most of those projects are even earlier stage than what we'll see at Life Science Angels. But I play a role there in helping shape and grow and spin out some of the technologies from UCSF. And as you mentioned, there's a few different CEO roles that I have right now. These are all early stage companies, but at different levels. C-Medics is a company we acquired in non-invasive monitoring for chronic heart failure. Tessa is a project that a venture fund had pulled me into to join the board, but then run it. It's spun out of Louisiana State University, and then there's some other projects. So I do have my experiences with early stage companies. In the past, I've started a few different orthopedic device companies and really got to understand what it was like to conceive of an idea where we saw an opportunity in the market and then grow the company to profitability and lead in our market segments. So not a lot of companies really in healthcare get a chance to do that. A lot of times you'll exit early or really won't get to commercialization. So getting a product on the market and really working through a number of those issues gave me a certain level of insight. So what I'll discuss tonight are aspects of this. And let me see here. Okay, first slide. So from an investor side, but also when I am looking at projects, and what I encourage a lot of entrepreneurs that I'll advise or I'm on, boards of, but early stage, when people are really looking at projects, I encourage them to start at the end. And so what do I mean by that? And what I'm saying here is, what's the end game? And so what's the path for liquidating the company? And what is the liquidity path? And what do I mean by that? So you really have to have an understanding of where you're going, and for a given project, what is the way we're going to exit? So an investor will want to hear this and want to understand that there is a path that's been trod in that space, meaning there's been other exits, and what could they reasonably expect? So, for example, there are a few projects that I'm involved with. You mentioned Squadra. Those are all implantable cardiovascular devices for structural heart, interventional cardiology. All of those projects spin out of Italy. And I help form entities around those companies. We fund them. We usually recruit the CEO, which falls on me a lot of times, and then we grow them. But all of those projects, because of the nature of the regulatory path, would be PMAs. So the likelihood of a company actually commercializing those is rare. They'll probably look to get some encouraging clinical data from trials and then want to exit to a strategic at that point. So again, the point is am I driving something to sales? Do I have to really grow sales to a certain point to exit? Or is animal data sufficient? So really understanding what that end game is and what the plans are for that is critical to all sorts of plans that will then emerge from that decision point. So is the project investable as well? So these are, again, very important early stage questions to ask. And I recommend people really talking to a number of people who could invest in the project to understand that. And the questions really circle around, is this a problem worth solving that you're focused on? Is this, or why is this the time to solve it? Meaning, is there a critical mass in the market? Like, for example, should we develop a COVID vaccine? Obviously, the time is critical for something like that to happen. Or perhaps there's technologies that are now useful in the market that help facilitate bringing a product to market and so forth. Or perhaps the economic environment is ripe for this. For example, there's been new coding for telehealth that Medicare just approved in January and is really changing the dynamics in the telehealth market. Why are we the ones to solve this? And what is the group should be able to discuss that in a very coherent way, meaning we've put together the right team and we've done it before, or we have unique skills to be able to do this. And then from that, really, what is the investment plan and what are all those risks? And a lot of times people will look at comparables like a lot of the law firms here locally will have subscriptions to something like PitchBook. And you can look at what the investment rounds were for comparable projects, what they raised at different rounds, what the timeframes were, what the exit points were, and so forth. And can I point to a viable plan that's underpinned in reality? All right, so the things that I look for and then go through and also will ask companies about are these elements for success. And they really center around, I'd say in the medical device industry, and of course this is applicable in ways to pharma and other areas, but it's sort of this six-legged stool that really has to work together. All of these things have to work in conjunction with the other because they overlap, as that was the intention of the graphic. And it's really important to work through these and understand the story in depth. So let's first start with the product innovation side of it. So Understanding that the basis for innovation has really clear points. Um, Meaning, we're innovating because of the following reasons. And for example, there could be an underserved patient population or excluded populations, or the products in the market are not addressing difficult anatomies, or the business models are not effective, and so forth. We're addressing inefficiencies and workflows, although, it's always interesting to talk to different clinical populations about that. If you talk to orthopedic surgeons, for example, they never think what they do is inefficient, that they are always doing things the most efficient way. And you have to compel them in the right way to understand, look, there are inefficiencies, and I'm giving you a broad generalization here, but, point things out to them that are really making sense of how they can, say, make a mediocre performance a much better performance. Or there's really issues, again, getting back to the cardiovascular example. A lot of times with cardiovascular devices and implants, there's really two elements to a device development. It's not only the device itself, but how am I going to deliver it? And a lot of times inefficiencies can really be around delivery of a device as opposed to the device itself. Of course, improvements in standard of care are quite important. And that's always a goal, to be able to move how healthcare is delivered. Clear evidence that there'll be future adoption, meaning, does the clinical community, will they get behind this? And it's interesting how many times I've seen lots of effort go into the development of a technology. And even though there may be a number of clinical interviews, by the time the product is really in the market, there may be limited adoption because the whole workflow was not really thought through, or getting the right clinicians, the right scientific advisory board, the right KOLs, the right publications, the right indications for use that distill out of the clinical studies. It wasn't done properly. So really being able to try to get in front of adoption, it's difficult to do a lot of times, but to really ensure that the community will pick up the product, like in any market. Again, support by the clinical community. Clear understanding, having a clear understanding in the clinical literature, state of the art, competitive products, how they're positioned. It's when I'll see in Life Science Angels, see really good pitches, the entrepreneurs in the team will usually have a very good, in-depth, detailed understanding of their competitors and what the pitfalls are and so forth. They really understand, how to position themselves in a clear way. It's very important. Some of these things may sound obvious, but again, it's interesting on how many projects may miss some of these elements. And finally, the IP analysis. Now, early stage companies can have challenges doing this. For example, getting the freedom to operate, because there's a cost associated with that. It's not unrare for an investor to see that from an early stage company. If it is done, it certainly gives the investor comfort and helps them de-risk it. But as detailed an analysis that can be done and ready to be shared in a diligence process is quite important. And especially from a regulatory standpoint, and I'll speak about this a little bit more later, depending upon the regulatory path, the level of strength of your IP will go up proportionally. So for example, if the product regulatory path is a 510K, especially for exits, the IP becomes much more important. And in fact, valuation analyses will be done, purely on the IP, given all things are also checked off, meaning, there's sales and it's effective and the failure rate is low in the field and so on and so forth. So really having a good understanding of IP and where that fits in, very important. Clear understanding of prior art claims, the strategic value of the proposed claims. When developing a project that's, say, a PMA, the IP will become less important because the obstacles and the barriers to entry and the timeframes to entry are just so much longer. Still important, but not as important if you're, say, taking a 510K pathway. Okay, market adoption. So really being able to clearly, truly define how you're differentiated from competitors and how you plan to displace those technologies. And a thing that is also interesting that as you can drill down in things and really understand a lot, there may be competitors you think have a strong position, but once you look at their clinical studies, and it can be straightforward to do by looking online about the studies and the structure of the studies and what the exclusion criteria was for various studies, that can reveal a lot about a competitor's position as well as their indications for use about where you may be able to displace them. Many times clinical studies will highly select patients to get the outcome that they want, but that can often be a weakness as well. Attractive business models. And who is the customer? And a long conversation today on one of my projects about this, on fully understanding who the customer is, and that's really most times it's just not one entity in the field that we live in. There's often the patient and the clinician and the hospital and the payer, the distributor, and so forth. So different elements will feed into market adoption. In a past life, it was interesting how we had a product line that we developed and brought to market and we thought was just fantastic and was going to make a big difference in the market, but the reimbursement was weak. And so when we went out and started building distribution, that customer would ask, what's the reimbursement? And that company did not have the best reimbursement story to tell them. It evolved over time and improved, but initially really got in the way. So that customer element wasn't as thought through as it could have been. Understanding who all those elements are is very important. Practical distribution models. Again, that's depending upon what you see as the exit. If you're going to commercialize the product, having a very strong understanding of who the distributors are going to be, how they work, how they like to work, what their commission structures are, they're going to hold inventory, all those things. Many of us in the device world will never get there, but if you do, you really need to understand these things and be able to tell that story clearly to investors so they have confidence. Clinical adoption and the importance of that. Building the right scientific advisory boards and ultimately adoptions by the various societies is critical. And so, for example, take orthopedic projects. A lot of times, the issue with an orthopedic device, let's say, is not necessarily developing the device or even getting clearance. It can actually be fairly straightforward. The problems can tend to be getting cases done and getting adoption by clinicians. And then strategics will often not look at it until you have those elements in place. So the scientific advisory board can make a big difference there. The right KOLs coming on board, and a lot of times they will have vast armies of fellows that have trained under them that they can disseminate product to trial in the field. So it can be an effective way to get a product tested and then disseminated to a large base of users. And then they can help you quite a bit in smoothing over things with adoption in the field, speaking at conferences, speaking to colleagues and recommending the product, helping you publish, doing follow-up and so forth. Getting societal adoption is a very challenging thing, and it's often not a small company thing to do. You may just position your project for an exit and let the bigger strategic take that on, but anyone who is able to get that, that's a gold mine for them. Okay, regulatory indications and for use and claims. So having a very effective regulatory strategy and a regulatory plan in place early on is critical in so many ways for product development, for fundraising, for all sorts of planning. It really has to work in conjunction with everything else. There's a lot of details that I provided here, and I'm happy to share the deck later. I don't need to necessarily go into this in great detail, but having a very effective regulatory plan that addresses all these elements is quite important. And times when we'll hear or I'll speak to companies and they'll say, well, we're not quite clear on what our product classification is just yet. So that will immediately put a pause on things from an investor standpoint. Really understanding what that is and getting some sort of read on that from an independent reviewer or consultant or so forth is just critical. And that's where the pre-sub meetings with the FDA will come in. Those have to happen because if you're just not clear, if is it a de novo or 510K or a PMA, obviously these are vastly different directions, costs, timeframes to exit, and so forth. There are a few slides that I have here on device classification, and I'm just going to skip over those quite quickly. But just in general, as I said, there were really three different classifications for device, 1, 2, and 3. And again, the implications are vast. Most people that are in the industry understand that quite well and what the implications are. But getting a good, solid determination on that and what your regulatory path is based upon the classification is critical. Now, one of the things I just wanted to mention here about a 510K versus a PMA, and most people in the space have some familiarity with it, but a 510K is really based on substantial equivalence. The de novo pathway has been used more and more, which is a little bit of something that lies between a 510K and a PMA, depending upon the risk of the product. And then, of course, the PMA will almost entirely be for Class 3 products, sometimes for Class 2 products. But they will mean different things to different investors. Usually an angel investor, and again, this is a broad, gross generalization, but they will tend to shy away from PMAs because that will mean that the company usually will need subsequent rounds of capital, often a lot of capital. Again, just getting back to the cardiovascular projects I mentioned, a typical ARC would be a seed of $1.5 million for some bench data and some animal data. And then moving on to Series A, which could be 10 to 20 million, and a Series B of 10 to 20 million to get through clinical studies. It could be even more than that. So an early stage investor is often frightened by that because they may feel that they're going to get significantly diluted on subsequent rounds. Other times they may not worry about that because actually PMA returns can be much higher than 510Ks. It really just depends upon the investor and what their appetite for risk is. And then quickly, again, just some background on Class 1, 2, and 3 devices. Most things will fall into a Class 2. Class 3 is a much smaller set of those. But also, in conjunction on the regulatory path, a key thing really to understand is implementing an effective quality system. It'll be important early on, and a whole other conversations about that. But the consulting group that you mentioned earlier, Product Realization Group, is quite effective at dropping in quality systems for early stage companies and helping them manage them and setting all those things up. They have a whole CAN system that can be dropped in and customized very cost effectively for companies. There are those sort of things out there. And then the pre-sub. Again, not entirely known in the audience, and some people may be familiar with this, but having the pre-sub meeting with the FDA can be a very effective tool to getting clarity on various regulatory questions that you may have. It's free. The FDA offers it as service. It's usually They'll give you an hour or two. You want to be able to go into those meetings with a good regulatory consultant or representative on your team who's familiar with those. Um, you basically want to say lead the witness, tell them what you feel like your proposed strategies are, what you think your regulatory path is, what sort of clinical studies and testing you think you need to do, what regulations you'll need to adhere to. So you're basically looking for validation from them. It can take 2 to 3 months to set up and get feedback on, but it will answer a lot of questions for you, and it's always a good recommendation um, to do that if you need to. Okay, on the clinical study side, clinical strategy. Again, very important to have a good, effective clinical strategy laid out and clear. It's usually will be, if you have to do these, will be a significant portion of your use of proceeds. So getting clarity on that, understanding again what the product classification is, where you're going to do those. Most folks that I know will tend to go to certain countries outside the US to do them, what the standards are, what your strategies will need to be if you do plan to go market products in the EU, and so forth. And to support that, there usually is a very comprehensive literature search and review to support the study design. And then there are elements to the study too. Again, this is just meant as background. Again, happy to share the slide, but these are usually key elements that have to be thought through and developed in developing your study materials and developing the overall study and plan. All right. And of course, the outcomes is what everyone is looking for what the safety and the effectiveness are your products. Also, many studies are structured for economic outcomes. And that's important consideration that I think many companies, even though they may be aware of it, may not effectively take advantage of the study to do that, because you may need to, you have to understand what the audiences will be for the study. You certainly may want this for FDA approval, but you may also want this for payer, insurance company approval, and you may want to be armed with this as for marketing materials, of course, to show, to develop published papers, peer-reviewed journals, and so forth, but also marketing pieces for market uses. In addition, these may be used to present to medical societies. So there may be considerations there if you're trying to establish what you're doing as a new standard of care and a billing for that. Okay, IP, which I alluded to earlier in the conversation, and just some considerations there. It really is, I think, important. When we'll review IP from a diligence standpoint, what often may be missing from the IP is the thought of strategic invention, meaning it's one thing to say, look, we saw a problem, we improved on that problem, and we're trying to protect that. It's really hard to find effective IP that has strong claims that can really give you some strategic positioning. But to give that consideration to it is really important. It's hard to get that from IP counsel because I think they're just trying to support you and implement your vision. But if you can think out further in time about where you think the market is going, and think a little bit beyond just say what the product is doing. For example, you may find elements that can disrupt service or distribution of your product in some way. On an element of your product, say on the digital health side, you may be able to do a lot to protect certain workflow elements that really make it difficult for others to get in. So just giving considerations above and beyond just the product, but how do I strategically invent so I can either block competitors more effectively, or I can align with them if they think they would be an important strategic acquirer of my company. So having a good understanding of their IP is critical. Freedom to operate, most people understand what that means, but really, again, understanding where you fit in the current IP landscape in your area is critical. And then I mentioned this earlier, the value of IP to support a 510K versus a PMA. Much more important for 510Ks and much more important that it's thought through and thorough. Reimbursement and revenue models. And I think I may be getting to the end of this, but again, this is going to be somewhat informational on trying to leverage existing versus new codes. I've been through developing new codes before in the past, and that's not to say people should not try to develop them, but they can be quite challenging to do. There's certain cycles of the year that the committees who establish the codes will meet. It's a long process. You have to be armed with appropriate information. The review committee, I think, is up to 18 people. They represent different elements in the marketplace, from insurers to clinicians, health systems, and so forth. They each have different needs and concerns and wants and desires. So it's challenging. If you can leverage existing codes and really understand how you're going to get paid, it will make a big difference. Of course, if you have a cash business and you can show that that cash business will live outside of getting reimbursed and will be strong, that's really the most compelling thing. So you're not beholden or limited by a reimbursement model, but getting a very good feel for this, having a good reimbursement consultant to walk you through it is going to be key, because you have to understand, how do I get paid? So this is, again, just some background, different categories of CPT codes. You can look through this at your leisure and research that. But again, the point of codes and getting new codes is challenging. But if you are able to get a code, and I've seen this done in very effective ways, where it is tied specifically to your product and what your product does, and the IP supports it in a very strong way, that is the highest value you can achieve. And that's always a goal. If you can do that and really own a space, that represents the most value. So the team really has to think through these things in an effective way. It has to be a very coherent strategy across the board. And I think at the end. So hopefully that was useful. Any questions?
Thank you, Howard. It's a nice speech. We learned a lot for sure. A lot of contents we need to digest. Is there any questions?
Yes, I would like to ask one. How do we get some minutes with Mr. Edelman?
My deck has my email, and if you see that, just shoot me an email. I'm happy to make time.
I think your experience and profile will be extremely invaluable to what we're trying to do, Howard. I looked through the first parts of your deck, and you mentioned things like process improvement, populations that are not participating in a particular sector. This is exactly where we're addressing. The market we're addressing, 85 to 90% of the world does not have access to it.
Well, happy to talk to you further, Tan, outside here. So just shoot me an email, and we'll sort out a time to connect.
Okay. Thank you so much.
It can be a consulting service called outsource CEO service.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I certainly dedicate a portion of my time to speaking to companies, and happy to do it. So
one of the reasons why we moved to the Bay Area and why QBay is attracted to us is because we would like to access people like Howard and his colleagues to help us, guide us, because you've done it, you've been there, you know how it works, and we need that wisdom from you, some of it transferred to us.
Yeah, let me just give a little bit of introduction about Tan. He got a company called Signex. Actually, it's doing the next generation genomics, also sequencing. So he actually gave a speech last time, so it was pretty good. and it's also on medical devices related. So it's really a good opportunity. You guys can collaborate at some point.
No, happy to chat. Years ago, I ran a development group at Biorad in the 90s, so I've had my exposure there and enjoyed it. So look forward to speaking to you.
Thank you, Howard. I look forward to meeting you and being in touch with you.
Michael, Raj has a question.
Yes,
Raj,
was there someone else?
Raj, you got a
Yes.
question?
Raj got a question, and okay, I can read for you. So Raj is saying about because of the pandemic right now, so a lot of the clinical trial cannot be placed in the hospital. So is there any possibility that we can run like a virtual clinical trial for medical devices? I don't know how we are going to run a virtual clinical trial, but any comments on that?
Yeah, you know, I have colleagues who are doing that, and I wish you can give you more specifics. But for example, I believe they were doing some in New Zealand. Some were happening in Australia, and they're able to do it all by Zoom. So, in fact, they're able to see enough and comment. That way they don't need to travel there. I think, of course, you're going to lose some things by not being there, and having an ongoing dialogue. When you're face to face, but they're still doing it, and they're making that happen. Look, I think I listen to the news like all of us. Hopefully, it sounds like by the summer things will start really clearing up and getting more back to normal. So if you're able to also, have your schedules make sense, I would think by then the fall things will be very much back to normal. And if you want to do face to face, be there for trials, I would think you'd be able to start doing them that way then. But people I know are doing things virtually. And they're getting effective results.
So
We can
Howard,
talk
this
more
is
about
this is Raj. So I was thinking more along the lines of not necessarily devices that may be used in a care setting like a hospital or something like that by surgeons, but maybe it's a device that's being tested, for patients in their homes or what have you, because
Mhm.
like maybe for gait, monitoring gait or something like
Yes.
that,
Mhm.
those kinds of devices, or maybe implants and things like that. And maybe if there is a way to collect the data from those devices, using a mobile application that feeds back into into a centralized database. Those are the kind of devices that I was thinking of in terms of doing it remotely, as opposed to having to come to a site and report data and diaries and all that stuff.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't see why you can't do that. If, of course, making sure people use product appropriately, and
Yeah.
You're not fighting that element of it. But why not? If you can get the data that way, and in fact, if it's really testing an element or elements of your system, so you see continuity of data, I think that's great.
And even how patients are using the device. I mean, you could have a video conference right there on their mobile device, and teach them how to use the device, make sure they're using it properly. All those things they can be built into or bundled into a common platform.
Yeah, I think all of us are wondering too how much of what's going on now is going to stick for the long term, and we may find that those sort of studies are going to be, there could be certain studies are just going to have to be done remotely like that. They could be more cost effective to do.
Yep.
Look, you certainly can't be, if it's a large study, be with all those patients all the time. You're going to have to do certain things that way anyway. This may just force the issue. So one of the first lessons and phrases I learned in marketing years ago is, if you can't fix it, you feature it. Sounds a little counterintuitive, but that may apply in this case, right? Like the obstacles are becoming positives for you.
Yeah. Yeah, and for real world, even after a device has been approved by FDA, there is so much real world evidence and real world data that needs to be collected to prove the efficacy of the device, that a remote trial would make sense in those scenarios.
Right. Yeah, and the customer, right? FDA doesn't know your customer.
Yeah.
Just because there's a clearance doesn't mean you stop there, or that's in and of itself what it's about. It's really about building a business, a thriving business, and making sure you satisfy what the customer needs, and do that in a way where their experience is just phenomenal. So often you got to go above and beyond what the FDA says.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? I got a question about I always compared the drug and devices. So actually the protection for the intellectual property for drug is quite black and white, but sometimes the medical device is a little bit ambiguous. For example, it's not as clear as the structures of the drug. There's always company try to reverse engineer some of the stuff. So is there any way that for a startup to be aware of before they get it even started?
In terms of how to structure IP?
IP protection.
Yeah. Well, look, I think any IP attorney who is worthwhile will walk you through that. They're going to look for broad claims, and the more mature a market is, the harder it is to carve things out. The more it starts moving away from a system to an element. We change the screw and that makes it unique. It's easy to work around. So, look, most businesses don't have IP. We are in a space where IP is important, and it's important from an investment standpoint and so forth. But a lot of things in our industry don't have IP. But if you have that, and where we are, it's becoming a necessary ingredient. You just have to really see what is critical that you have to protect. And then, as I talked, more strategically, you have to think more expansively about things. So, like for example, there was a project out of UCSF. It was a women's health project. Just early discussions. I don't know how applicable this is, but the conversation went this way on IP, and they had sorted out a device that would be used to help healing post-procedure in the uterus. If there's scarring, it could lead to sterility for women. So they had a device that would go in the uterus, be implanted, if you will, for about a week or so to help the healing process. But the conversation on the IP, it was clear that it was a simple device and there were elements to protect. But it then went to say, well, what if we had sensors in that device, that reported certain pressures, and fed that back in a certain way, and allowed you to then have a certain additional, what additional things could you get from that, right? So at first it was, the clinicians were thinking, oh, that's kind of crazy. I don't know if I could really use that. What does that mean? But then as the conversation went, they started seeing how there may be utility in having a certain platform to gather data over time, and what that might have meant for collecting data over a large patient population and different demographics and so forth. So it was just expansive. It became a lot more strategic. And as they found other players in that space, there were elements of that, oddly enough, that was coming up for them. So they thought there could be a strategic positioning that would make the overall project was a simple molded plastic device into something that was a lot more of a system, and potentially create a lot more value. Anyway, you have to be put on a different hat, I think, when you're thinking of IP as opposed to executing. When you're in development, you're all about change. When you're in manufacturing, you're all about stability and fighting change. So you just have to really understand the marketplace, the competitors, what they're doing, and how can you really build a fence, a broad fence around what you're doing as possible.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay,
right.
Thanks, Howard.
You
Thanks a
bet.
lot for your time, and
Of course, happy to help.
really appreciate it. Our next company is going to be Arise Precision Medicine. I'm just going to give a brief introduction about the Rice Precision Medicine. They're a biotech company that develops drug candidates for cancers using precision medicine. They're also trying to design drugs that can resolve a specific individual cancer, and also use the technology to design a specific way to stop the cause of cancers, then the target and protect the delivery system. Also, concentrate the drug inside the cancer cells, leaving and also leaving the normal cells undamaged. Brad is the CEO of the company, and he is going to talk about it. Brad, you should have the full control now. You here?
Alrighty, I'm here. Thank you so much, Michael. Let me go ahead and get this up here. Get that out of the way.
Just put it
All
on
right,
the full screen.
All right, you seeing this okay?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, excellent. I'll just, real briefly before I get started here, Howard, I wanted to mention we're currently under review at the Life Science Angels. So if you like what you hear in the presentation tonight, if you don't mind sharing with those that are responsible for making decisions, I'd appreciate it.
Happy to. Nice to meet you, Brad.
Nice to meet you as well. Also, we're scheduled to present at the Keiretsu screening group tomorrow. So if anybody has any comments on the presentation, I'd certainly welcome your comments now. It's good timing before that talk tomorrow morning. So we'll get into it here. Rise Precision Medicine, we like to call ourselves the PRDM oncogene targeting company. The reason for that is the focus of our work is a family of genes and proteins known as the PRDMs, which we believe are very early involved in cancerization of the cell. And so our tagline is targeting cancer at the root cause through this genetic change that happens with the PRDMs. Unfortunately, cancer is a problem that we're all too aware of, and unfortunately, either ourselves or people we know and love have been afflicted with cancer. We represent, the patient experience here with this child who's, suffering from the effects of chemotherapy with hair loss, and all too common side effect of the drugs that are out there that are toxic, that are not effective, and even some of the newer drugs, their claim to fame is they can extend lifespan by 2 months. So we're not dealing with a situation where the drugs meet the need. So our goal at Arise is to tackle this large problem. Over 14 million people annually diagnosed with cancer. And our goal is to create a medicine that avoids the harsh patient side effects. And we believe we can do that by actually killing cancer by targeting the genetic root cause of it. So I mentioned this family of PRDMs. There's 16 different family members. There's a lot of academic research that's been done on this family demonstrating a role for the PRDMs. And as you can see here, a number of different cancer types. The ones in red are the ones that we've gone through and have had done some initial in vivo work demonstrating a proof of principle for a screening of our drug compounds against these types of cancers. So really the early work Arise was about identifying a lead product and moving that forward. And so we chose a candidate that goes against PRDM2. And the reason for this is it's highly disrupted in lung cancer, which is one of the worst cancers out there and a huge market in need of new therapies. And what's really exciting here is that the PRDM2 and its protein RIS1 has shown to have a methylation event or an abnormal event that occurs in 73% of the tumors. So this is a very large potential market for our drug to be able to work for a real majority of the people suffering from lung cancer, and in this case, adenocarcinomas. Now, the immuno-oncology drugs are touted because they can work in 20% of patients. So we're clearly dealing with a different situation here. If in fact it's 3/4 of the tumors that have this disruption that's occurring in the PRDM2 gene. And this gene is a known tumor suppressor, thousands of publications on the matter. It just has not yet been commercialized. So that's our approach here to develop a therapy that goes against this disruption. And what's even an extra added benefit is this methylation event can actually be measured in the sputum as a biomarker that can really lend us to being able to identify the patients that are suffering from this type of event who would actually respond to our treatment. So we have a proof of concept experiment that demonstrates that PRDM2 is a druggable target in lung cancer. We show this here in a xenograft mouse model with an A549 adenocarcinoma cell line. You can see here in yellow against the historical reference control, we are administering two different formulations. One is just our free siRNA. This is a RISE-47 is the nomenclature for this. And then a different formulation where the RISE-47 is actually protected in a drug delivery system. And so this is what we believe is going to be the formulation that really helps because this siRNAs need to be protected in the bloodstream from RNases, and the nanojackets actually help deliver the siRNA specifically to the site of the cancer cell. And so you can see here with this formulation, combination of the RISE-47 with a nanojacket, we're able to get a significant decrease in tumor growth, really providing this experimental proof of concept as our first go around here in an experimental model. It's not a flatline event, so we're excited that at least we're demonstrating proof of concept, and now we're working to advance the efficacy on this even further. So to visualize kind of the steps forward for us, you have this nanoparticle over here on the left. siRNA is protected, and what we're working on now is actually targeting of this nanoparticle to a ligand that is expressed on cancer cells and not on healthy cells. So demonstrated here with this squiggly line, but what this really represents is a second layer of specificity for our siRNA to the cancer cells, increased uptake into the cancer cell. We believe this will significantly add to the already demonstrated proof of concept that we showed before, giving us an even better product for treatment of lung cancer. The goal really is to be a first-in-class, potential first-line treatment. We believe we have a high chance of success for this because we're targeting the actual cause of this. We're not going after any of the downstream mutations or any of these other things that occur later on in the cancerization. We're going after the first insult in this PRDM methylation event. We have an intellectual property position in place with a couple of different coverage of different PRDMs. We have a couple of PCT applications on various different PRDMs. We have 3 issued patents on PRDM3. And we have a provisional patent about to be advanced to a PCT application covering PRDM2 that I've just shown you here today. As I was mentioning, this approach has significant advantages over the currently available treatments, including chemotherapy, the immuno-oncology drugs, Keytruda and Opdivo, and some of the targeted inhibitors that are going against some of these site mutants. I'd also like to point out a small molecule approach that some other companies like Constellation and Epizyme are taking towards this epigenetic modifiers, like it's similar to what we're doing with the PRDMs. However, they're taking a different approach with a small molecule, but they are able to demonstrate that you can build a $2 billion+ company based on therapeutics targeting these epigenetic modifiers. So this is cancer, so the revenue projections are quite large. Our first goal is a licensing deal with a pharmaceutical partner at the preclinical stage. So about half of the deals right now are occurring at that stage, where the pharma partner can be a part of the IND conversations with the FDA and really use their expertise in the human clinical trials. So these are typically upfront fees between $20 and $50, $100 million with back-end milestone payments that could reach up to $1 billion. We've put together a great team to tackle this project with a good mix of business and science expertise. The company was originally founded by Lonnie Bookbinder, who has a long career in the industry, has worked at a number of the pharmaceutical companies, has also had a number of experiences as an entrepreneur, over 50 years in the industry. He identified this technology from a cancer center down in San Diego, and we have since been working on enabling this technology. I originally started with the company on the science side of things, moved up to COO, VP of R&D, and have recently taken over as CEO of the company. We've also brought on some help from Glenn Kazo, who's a founder of a company called Enzon that was responsible for the invention of the pegylation technology, which really helps prevent recognition by the immune system and also helps in delivery down to the site of the cancers. Glenn's had an amazing career, has a leading role in raising over $500 million from 3 IPOs. He's helping us now with putting together the Series A to advance Arise's position moving forward. We have a board in place with our VC investor, Moneta Ventures, that has been working very well with us towards advancing the seed round and moving on towards a Series A here in the future. Also have Kevin Nagel, who's well known as co-owner of the NBA Sacramento Kings, and also Major League Soccer, soon to be Major League Soccer local Sacramento team. He also has experience in the pharmaceutical industry with a form of Upjohn, and then started a company that he sold to Rite Aid in the pharmaceutical space. We've recruited some advisors that are matched to the expertise that we're in need of. We have an siRNA advisor who has a lot of experience with a couple of different siRNA companies, a drug development advisor, and Sandeep Dugar, who spent some time at J&J, also has started up a company, Spera Pharma, that we're working with to do our animal studies. We have a drug delivery advisor in Mark Kester. It was his technology developed at Penn State that became the nano jackets that I mentioned as our drug delivery system. And we also have on board the original discoverer of the PRDM family of genes in Xi Wang, who's now a professor in China. Our exit strategies are typical sale to pharma after a few years of a couple of different licensing deals, able to achieve a suitable valuation for an exit through an M&A, or there's also the IPO route. So milestones to date, I mentioned the Moneta Ventures. They're a large participant in a $685,000 seed round. This brings our total raise to date at almost 1.5 million. So we're very happy to have Moneta involved. We also have a partner in Spera Pharma, has a $2 million master services agreement with us, in which they contribute $1 million in equity for $1 million in cash for services. We have some good validation from the life science organizations in the California Life Sciences Institute that selected us for their FAST advisory program. We're also selected as a Buzz of Bio winner this past June at the Bio International Conference. So we are fundraising right now. We're seeking $350,000 as an add-on to our seed round. The use of funds for this is to continue the in vivo efficacy and safety testing for our lead candidate, ARISE-47, as well as bring on some of these additional platform candidates for other cancer types, such as breast cancer, colon cancer, gastric leukemia, and also multiple myeloma. So thanks so much. Happy to answer any questions you have or any comments about the presentation.
Thank you, Brett. Is there any questions?
Yes, me again.
Go ahead.
Oh, I really love the presentation, Brad.
Thank you.
I'm not from the life sciences background, but last few years I've studied in this word epigenetics, and the ability to switch on or switch off a gene to do a particular action, I think, is the way forward. And what my company is trying to do is to help clinicians identify the exact genes or the bunch of genes that may cause a particular disease. And we hope then to work with companies like yours to be able to offer a clinician a solution for his patient.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, it's all about identifying the right patients that are actually going to respond to the treatments you're giving them, right?
Yes.
Mm.
So I would like to know more, and if there's any way I can help and put you in touch with the range of contacts I have in UK, Middle East, Asia, I'd be happy to do so as well.
Wonderful. Well, we'll have to set up a time to talk, Dan. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I can certainly help you guys to connect it.
Well, that's your job, isn't it, Michael? The connector.
It is. It is.
Well, I think this our little presentation proves the role of Cubase. You're putting together disparate people to come together on a very narrow focused and what I would say very worthwhile endeavor.
I'll take it as a compliment.
It is.
Any other questions? And actually, I have a question about the drug, the RISE 47. If I'm understanding correctly, it should be a PRDM sRNA. So as far as I know, the sRNA got approved by FDA. It's very near. It's actually 2 years ago. I forgot the name of the company. So it's something about the neurodegeneration, the brain stuff. The main issue for the sRNA drug is because the stability physiologically. So I mean, so the delivery is actually very important for any sRNA drug. So can you just give us more information about it? Is it lipid? Is there any lipid capsule as some other previous people used before?
Yeah, so the company you mentioned is called Alnylam, and their focus has been on liver-based diseases. The reason for this is that's where delivery of sRNA is the most easiest to achieve. So they kind of took the low-hanging fruit option of going for sRNAs that already made it to the liver anyway, and that's a big location of transport for lipid-based drug delivery systems. So they used a liver targeting approach, and we want to not get caught up in the liver. So we're going with a drug delivery system that's a lot smaller, so it doesn't get caught up in the filter of the liver. Is able to stay in circulation and actually be delivered to a tumor site out in other parts of the body. So this product from Keystone Nano is a calcium phosphosilicate based drug delivery system. So it's just an addition of atoms on top of the sRNA, kind of forms a shield over on top of the outside of the sRNA to protect from things like RNases in the blood and recognition by the immune system, to allow for a longer half-life in the blood and delivery to the tumor.
May I know how many drugs are being approved by FDA since 2018 in total?
So Alnylam has 2 drugs approved, and I've heard there's a third one that's very near to being approved here in the near future.
Okay, thanks.
There's also a number of clinical trials going on right now for sRNAs for cancers as well. So it shouldn't be too much longer before we get an sRNA drug approved for the cancer indication space. Hopefully make things even easier for us at that point.
Brad, how do you plan to recruit participants for clinical trials? Is that something that you plan to do in-house or outsource, or what's the strategy for recruiting patients? How do you go about finding them?
Yeah, so our preferred route of doing this is really to partner with one of the large pharmas whose expertise is already in this space. And you know, the earlier we can partner with them, the better. As I was mentioning, about half of the deals actually occur at the preclinical stage. And so this would be the optimal way forward. We also talked with a speaker last week, Charles, who has an internal system for doing these clinical trials. And after the presentation last week, we are actually able to talk to Charles and are continuing that conversation on how we might be able to work together with him as a way of performing these clinical trials.
Brad, this is Lonnie. I might just add the concept of biomarkers guiding patients into things like siRNA type drugs, because if the lesion is approachable like siRNA for lung cancer is, then you have a natural selection that goes on when patients are being diagnosed for what's driving their disease. And that'll make clinical studies a lot faster and perhaps less expensive and hopefully fewer side effects. But just want to add a little bit more flavor to that story about what guides patients into the studies.
But all of the animals work are actually done in-house or also outsourced, collaborating?
Yeah, we're collaborating with our partner, Sphera Pharma, located in India, and they're the ones actually completing those trials.
So the data you showed just now for the survival, I mean the tumor, the volume of the tumor is actually done in their site, right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Any other questions?
So just a just a related question: is that a kind of a virtual company for now, or you do something in-house as well? Just following Michael's question.
Yeah, we've been responsible for all the in vitro studies, so we do that in-house, and then we've partnered with Sphera to do the animal studies. So our focus is more on the early stage drug design, screening, and all the in vitro type work.
Got it. Thanks.
Oh wait, you're also doing the screening?
Yes. Yeah. All the in vitro screening.
Okay.
So some siRNAs are far more effective than others. We've actually been quite surprised on the variability of responses from the different siRNAs. So it's somewhat of a hit and miss at the moment. So there's some screening work that needs to be done to really identify the lead candidates.
The screening is based on the potency or the stability. I mean, which is the main focus?
Efficacy. So cancer cell killing.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay.
All right. Well, thanks so much
Brad.
for the opportunity to speak. Appreciate it.
Thanks everybody. So this is our third event for the QB Accelerator program, and thanks a lot Harvard for joining us and share a lot of experience with us. It's a pleasure to have everybody. If I'll share the information if you wanted to connect with any mentors. I'll try to connect you guys. And also we have some audience in China who is investors. So if they're interested, I'll also connect you with them as later after the talk. Okay, thanks everybody. So we'll have our next event in 2 weeks, and I'll just send you the information about our fourth event for the program. So thanks a lot for the presentation and for the participation. Thank you.
All right, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Howard. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.